Christopher John Bjerknes. It is May 14th, 2024, an absolutely gorgeous day, and I'd like to talk a little bit about something that's very strange. We came this close to a nuclear war between India and Pakistan, and almost no one is talking about the fact that tens of millions of people almost just died, and potentially a global nuclear conflict has just been averted. This happened because Israel is now firmly aligned with India, and that gave India the chutzpah to attack Pakistan. And the only thing that stopped this imminent nuclear war between these two powers was the fact that the Pakistani Air Force devastated the Indian Air Force, and the Pakistanis started to prepare for a nuclear attack. You can be certain that America and Israel let India know that Pakistan was preparing to wage nuclear war against India, and that India had better prepare to strike Pakistan first. And when India saw how badly they were being wiped out by the Pakistanis in the air, they kind of lost their appetite to engage in a nuclear war with Pakistan, because it wasn't looking like things were going to go India's way. So India backed off and backed down, for now anyway. They may be being coaxed to go at it again. We don't know. But it was primarily the Israelis and the Americans, puppets of the Israelis, who were egging this war on. And the Chinese were egging on the Pakistanis to engage in this crazy nuclear war. Now, for decades now, Benjamin Netanyahu has been telling us that we need to attack Iran because of the threat of nuclear war. And we were told that we had to go after Saddam for the same reason, and his nuclear facilities were bombed. But for some reason, when a real nuclear war almost broke out not too very long ago, nobody seemed to care. It seemed they couldn't care less. There was no international effort to stop it. Trump is trying to claim credit for ending it, but he didn't have anything to do with it. India wanted out, and it was going to stop no matter what Trump did. This is tremendously significant, because we need to realize that the powers that be almost started a very major nuclear war between two heavily armed nuclear powers. They'd been preparing this ever since the end of World War II, when they created separatist and secessionist movements that resulted in West and East Pakistan. East Pakistan became Bangladesh, and they exploited the many centuries long conflict between Muslims in India and Hindus in India. And they created these fault lines in northern India and northwestern India, and along also with Bangladesh and with the Chinese, where they could trigger a war pretty much whenever they wanted to. All they had to do was pay or brainwash some terrorists to turn the heat up, get the right people in power in one government or both, and then pull the trigger and arrange for a nuclear war. So why isn't this the major news around the world? Instead, they're trying to treat it like it's some kind of farcical joke, making fun. Ooh, somebody just ran by. Looks like it might have been somebody big. Why isn't everyone focused on the fact that we just narrowly escaped and avoided and are in imminent danger of a major nuclear war? It seems that it only matters when it affects Israel, and that Israel is okay with the idea of this brothers' war between Muslim Indians and Pakistanis who used to be Indian Muslims, and the Hindutva, which is a religious, ultra-nationalistic party modeled on the Zionists, and is very close to Netanyahu and Likud and the most hardcore Zionists in Israel. So this tells us that these people are eager to ignite a nuclear war. And they put out all kinds of propaganda all at once that Trump was turning on Netanyahu, which is, of course, BS, but it fits in with their prophecies of the Jewish version of Antichrist Armalus and Messiah, son of Joseph, Benjamin Netanyahu, going at war with one another, with Armalus trying to unite Esau, representing Western Christendom and the Roman Empire, and trying to bring it together with Ishmael, being the Arabs, Saudi Arabia, where Muhammad was from, and the Muslims. And Trump is making this visit to the Middle East, and all the usual suspects were trying to create the narrative that he had turned on Netanyahu and is suddenly going to put the interests of Americans first. And they all got the memo. They all parroted the same script, and they were doing it before this happened, leading up to this. Some of them for a very long time. So this was all obviously scripted and prepared. And one of the purposes of that is to make Jews around the world panic and fear that instead of fighting and mutually consuming one another, Christians and Muslims are going to unite against the common enemy and potentially destroy it. And this was always the prophecy of Armalus, that he was the guardian angel, the prince of the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude. And he would endanger the Jews by uniting the Leviathan and the Behemoth and bringing them together in war against Jewry, Jacob, Israel. Israel is just another name for Jacob. And so those Jews in the know, and just out of common sense, are highly fearful of the idea because they have always been trying to pitch battles between Christians and Muslims. But they always feared this Antichrist Armalus figure because his mission is to bring Islam and Christendom together and march into Jerusalem and wipe out the Jews. That's their prophecy. But in doing so, what he really does is bring an end to Christendom, to Edom, to Esau, the Amalekite Roman Empire. They've always favored the Muslims over the Christians. The Muslims are more holy, more spiritual, more truly the Noahide slaves of the Jews than the Christians. The role of the Christians was always to play the role of Satan and persecute the Jews, keep them segregated to preserve them until the world to come, and to obtain redemption for them by trying them in the furnace of affliction and tempting them, as Satan does, to sin and become atheistical and apostate or idolatrous and worship the Virgin Mary and Jesus Christ. So they've got that all set up. They got their people in place. Trump is playing the scripted role of Armalus. Netanyahu that of Messiah, son of Joseph. And they are pretending that these two are at odds with each other. But one has to keep in mind that Armalus is the Gentile Messiah, son of Joseph. And that is played by Donald Trump. And the Jewish Messiah, son of Joseph, is Benjamin Netanyahu. And the whole war between them, the whole scripted farce, is entirely fake. And Armalus, who is supposed to be the guardian angel of the Gentiles, is born from the Virgin Mary as a marble statue in Rome, and Satan himself, just as Jesus was, and just as Cain was born from Eve and the serpent, Samael, in the Garden of Eden. The relevance of that is that Armalus is a treacherous leader who betrays his subjects, who betrays the citizens and members and slaves of his empire to ultimately bring them to death and complete extermination. And I've shown that in several videos now where I quote the primary sources of Avkat Rokel, the Sefer Zerubbabel, and the doctrines and Kabbalah of Messiah, son of Joseph, the Gaon of Vilna, as recorded by a student of his nephew in the book Kol HaTor, the song or the voice of the turtle dove. These all say that this war has to take place between Armalus and Messiah, son of Joseph. And the Gaon of Vilna specified that the form the war is to take is for Armalus to try to unite the Muslims and the Christians, Esau and Ishmael, against Jacob. And Jews have to pray to save the Messiah, son of Joseph. And if they do so, then they will prove themselves to be the worthy generation. And the worthy generation is the generation that gets to see the construction of the third temple of Solomon and the anointing of David HaMelech, King David, Messiah, son of David, King of the world. And they will also be privileged to see the Leviathan, meaning Christendom, meaning Esau, and the Behemoth, being the Eurasianist, Marxist, and Muslims, the spiritual aspect of the Gentiles, destroy one another and consume one another in a great war that will leave only the Jews standing as rulers of the entire earth, ruling it from Jerusalem. The Messiah, son of David, ruling it from Jerusalem. And people are seemingly oblivious to the fact that this script almost just played out in a nuclear war between Israel and Pakistan that could have led to a nuclear war that destroyed all of humanity. So, well, the PSYOP alternative media continues to cheerlead for Donald Trump. It is increasingly becoming more and more obvious that his supposed spatting with Benjamin Netanyahu has all been a completely staged farce. And so people need to rise up out of the darkness and become aware of the existential danger that we're all in, and the fact that the enemy quite recently just tried to instigate a nuclear war which had the potential to ruin humanity and bring about devastation all over the globe. And now Armalus is trying to portray himself as if the peacemaker who prevented all this. But the international community did nothing but try to egg it on and ensure that it happened, primarily through their silence and their refusal to do anything to bring the parties of this conflict together in negotiations toward peace. It was instead only the failure of the Indian Air Force to obtain air superiority in Pakistan, and the fact that the Pakistanis were readying their nuclear arsenals to attack India. All of that was not a game. that was quite real. And we just narrowly escaped a horrific nuclear war that at a minimum would have claimed the lives of tens of millions of people. And they're trying to dehumanize the Indians and Pakistanis so that people don't care if they kill one another. And they will view this as a necessary harvesting of their lives to reduce the population. India now has the greatest population on earth. It's terribly overpopulated. They were also hoping to chase Pakistanis and Indians into the West to destroy the entire West the way that they're doing to Canada and Great Britain. So if we are going to have a genuine opposition to Messiah, son of Joseph, and Israel, we're going to have to be able to defeat their influence around the world. And we're also going to have to be able to contain their Samson option, which is to wage a nuclear strike on the capitals of Europe and on their neighboring Muslim capitals. Now, what has to happen to genuinely prevent this from happening is Israel needs to be contained. Just as air defense systems were set up around Israel to defend it from the missile strikes of the Houthis in Yemen and the Iranians, we need air defense systems surrounding and containing Israel so that none of their military aircraft, none of their aircraft at all, can leave Israel. And so that any missiles launched from Israel will immediately be shot down and destroyed, as well as any military aircraft that attempt to leave Israel. That needs to be an international effort. And at the same time, the international community has to demand that Israel allow inspections of its nuclear facilities and denuclearize. And they must be forced to surrender not only all of their atomic and thermonuclear bombs and materials for doing it, but all of their fissile materials, all of their centrifuges for manufacturing and refining fissile material. Everything that Israel proposes be done to Iran must be done to Israel. And that would be a true situation in which there was a real effort to contain and defang the Israeli threat to all of humanity. So any leader who is not moving in that direction, but is nevertheless posturing and posing as if they oppose Netanyahu, Messiah, son of Joseph, is a liar, is deceiving you, is the treacherous Antichrist called by the Jews Armalus. So Donald Trump is obviously a fraud. And this is not leading toward peace, but instead, as 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 3 says, the Antichrist will posture as if bringing peace, but this will ultimately result in and culminate in a global conflict that will destroy humanity. there are corresponding passages in the book of Daniel. I seem to remember it's chapters 8, 9, and 11 that are interpreted as relating to the Antichrist, Armalus Trump, and his great imposture that he is a man bringing peace to the world, when he is instead hell-bent on bringing global conflict. So don't forget that Armalus Adolf Hitler was allies with Joseph Stalin before Operation Barbarossa, and that Armalus Adolf Hitler betrayed the German people at Dunkirk and allowed the British to escape. He issued halt order after halt order, which ceased his advances, and then he divided his troops and led them into ultimate failure on purpose, because Armalus, like Jesus Christ, who was the Armalus of his generation, who had a dual nature, so he was both the Gentile and the Jewish Messiah, son of Joseph, led the Roman Empire into its decline and destruction. Hitler, the Armalus of his generation, led Germany into decline and ultimate destruction. And Armalus Donald Trump is engineering things in the farcical name of fighting Israel and Netanyahu so that Israel can dominate the Middle East and bring the Muslims and the Gentiles into nuclear war, as it just attempted to do with Pakistan and India. So people need to investigate and look very closely at what just happened and what could have and might yet happen between Pakistan and India, because that is the ultimate goal of these people. The Indians being snake worshippers, worshippers of Samael, worshippers of Satan, aligning themselves with Israel and the United States, aligning themselves with Edom, Amalek, and the Leviathan, and the Pakistanis being aligned with the Eurasianist, communist, Chinese, and with the Turks, and all the powers of the behemoth. This was slated to be a very major, devastating conflict between Leviathan and Behemoth. And it was only stopped because Pakistan frightened India, defeated India in the skies, and started to initiate the process of launching their nuclear weapons at India. And you can be absolutely certain that America provided satellite and other intelligence to the Indians, not to scare them, not to get them to stop, but instead to provoke them into themselves preparing their nuclear arsenals to wage a preemptive strike against Pakistan, to throw everything they have at the Pakistanis and do as much damage to life, property, equipment, and weaponry as possible in the shortest possible time. And the Indians lost their nerve, and they lost their appetite to engage in the Jews' scripted battle of Gog and Magog between the Leviathan forces of the Indians, the snake worshippers, and the Eurasianists, being represented primarily by the Pakistanis and their most powerful and significant backer and ally, the Red Chinese, the communist, Eurasianist Chinese. The Russians are very closely aligned to both India and Pakistan, and the Soviets played a major role in balkanizing India into India, East and West Pakistan. But that's not to say that we can't capitalize on the illusion that the enemy is fabricating, the narrative that Donald Trump is opposed to the neoconservatives and the Zionists and the warmongers. We absolutely need to capitalize on that to our advantage. And what we have to do is to inspire people to become better, inspire people to raise their children to be the next generation of statesmen and leaders who are fully aware of the existential danger we face. We don't have time to wait for that to come to fruition, but it is important to create and capitalize on the new zeitgeist, which is increasingly recognizing who the enemy is and the enemy's designs to exterminate all of us. We also need to capitalize on the farcical antics of the black Nazi minstrel shows, which world Jewry is putting before our eyes, with people like Ye and the swarms of black influencers, comedians, athletes, musicians, rappers, who helped to elect Armalus Trump and who are promoting Nazism and racial strife between blacks and whites to confuse, redirect, and sabotage any authentic, dignified, and efficacious opposition to the enemy's plans to destroy humanity. And the way that we can do that is to harness this energy in constructive and productive ways, as opposed to the inorganic, farcical, degenerate, and perverse ways that this black minstrel show is meant to achieve. So instead of waging war against one another, we need to unite in our common purpose to save ourselves from the enemy of humanity. And we need to install leadership, or form a new nation of our own with leadership that understands what the enemy is doing and how it has for thousands of years been planning to utilize this Armalus Antichrist to bring us into global war in the name of maintaining peace, to pit Christians and Muslims, blacks and whites, against one another in the name of unifying them against the enemy, the common enemy. Because, as the Gaon of Vilna stated, if a real Armalus came along who effectively, authentically, and sincerely united Esau and Ishmael, the people whom Jacob is constantly trying to bring into war with one another, if they were instead to unite against the common enemy, they would have an easy time defeating Israel and the organized enemy around the world. But these people have been planning this for 2,500 years and have all of their agents in place to subvert any authentic opposition which might otherwise arise against them. And they very often try to create a release valve every once in a while and make it appear that their agents have been playing 5D chess and have instead turned against the enemy and are now waging war on it. This is to get everyone to calm down and cool off and to not feel that they are any longer under threat, so that people do not unite against this common adversary and start to relax and feel safe and comfortable. And that's the great danger of the moment that we are at in this struggle to save ourselves. They are trying to provoke people to relax, to organize instead behind Armalus, so that they can completely control the opposition to their dominance of the world, so that they can allow things like a nuclear war and provoke things like a nuclear war between Pakistan and India, which could potentially consume humanity at large. We cannot relent. We cannot relax. We cannot give up the struggle. And we should not and must not ally ourselves with and unite behind Armalus Trump. That is a certain recipe for ultimate defeat and total destruction of humanity. At the same time, we desperately need to make gains against the enemy, to take the high ground and establish a new society with genuine, sincere leadership that authentically opposes the enemy, that has a real plan to defeat the enemy and to preserve us and our people. We need to arrange that now. We cannot let up on the enemy. We cannot relax and take a breath, as I so desperately need. Instead, we have to keep marching and fighting and struggling and educating people. We need to capitalize on this moment. We need to be able to boycott the enemy. We need organic, authentic demonstrations of power. We need to capitalize on the idea that we have the ability to counter cancel culture by funding and supporting people who are attacked by those who want to silence people. We need to be able to counter the enemy by boycotting it in an organized and effective fashion, by boycotting all the companies that are subverting our culture and our leadership. And we should be doing that not only among the least of our people, but much more importantly, we need to organize and organically support leading intellectual voices who are willing to stand up against the enemy. We need to create platforms for those voices and get them out prominently to the world public. We should not be portraying ourselves as if we are hateful, racist degenerates, because that discourages the people who potentially have the greatest power from taking the risk of opposing the enemy. We instead need to demonstrate to them that if they do take that risk, they will be supported and they will not be stigmatized as though they are racist, hateful people. But instead, people will realize that they are opposing the most racist and hateful people on earth, the people who want to generate nuclear wars between brothers to exterminate us. So we need to clean things up a little bit, but we have to capitalize on this organic and largely staged emergence of the means to combat cancel culture and to organize boycotts against industrial and service industry corporations which attempt to silence us and break our back. And we need to be very leery and wary of politicians who are traitorous and support our enemies like Putin and Xi Jinping while pretending to be anti-Zionist, because they are simply trying to harness all of this energy and to cause us to relax and believe that things are now in good hands and that these people are there to save us and we should rally around them. But Trump is now beginning to show his cards. And we really, really need to capitalize on this moment and not lose all of this momentum that has recently built up.